Welcome into this Five Clubs conversation, Open Championship Week. Now, normally it'd be him driving this show and it'd be his show, but I kind of forced my way into this show with Gil Hanse. And Gil, as you know, is a regular contributor here at Five Clubs, and he has had some great guests this year to talk about the major championship venues. This one I know is close to his heart. It's close to mine too. And to talk with him about a place that he absolutely adores, I'm looking forward to this, and I think you're thoroughly going to enjoy Gil Hanse's insights on the old course at St. Andrews. With that, we welcome in the host, who's not in the host chair. That, of course, Gil Hanse. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. You're a much better host than I am, so I'm always happy that when we do these things, they're a lot of fun.
Well, this one's particularly fun because, you know, look, you and I can nerd out about certain things in golf, and you more so, obviously, when it comes to your line of work. But there's an affection associated with where the world of golf is this week. And the old course, it conjures up a lot of things, including memories. And I remember asking you a specific question that I'm going to ask again in a moment, but I want to ask you, the first time you walked or were there, when was it?
It was August of 1987. And it was, Tracy and I had flown. I'd actually spent the entire summer working for Tom Doak on his first golf course at High Point. And we left about mid-August for me to go and for the William Frederick Dreer Award, which I had won at Cornell. And we flew over. I think we were on some really cheap charter flight into Luton Airport. We couldn't even fly into Heathrow. And we rented a car and we drove up. Literally, I think we landed at like 5:30 in the morning. We drove up to St. Andrews and we got there, I would say probably 4-ish in the afternoon. It was still summer, so there was still a lot of light left. And we parked the car and I walked out and I just, obviously was in awe of what I was seeing and is so excited. And so the starter's hut was right there by the first tee and there was nobody around and on the golf course. But I saw the starter in there and I went in and I said, first time here, I'm so excited. How do I arrange to play? And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Do you have your clubs?" And I said, "Yeah, they're in the car." He said, "Well, go get them and you can play." And I thought, oh my God, what an incredible opportunity. And I went over to play and he said, "Nah, on you go, just go." Because I think he could tell how enthused and genuinely excited I was. And I was completely jet lagged and overnight flight, 8 hours and 8.5 hours in the car, whatever it took. But it was just the most amazing introduction to the most amazing golf course. Just how wonderful. I don't think you can do that anymore. I don't think the starters are allowed to have that kind of discretion at this point in time. And then conversely, I think that was probably a Friday. So 2 days later, it was Sunday and the course was closed. So it was a lovely day. And I go out to take notes. I've got all, this is well before computers and iPads and all that. So I've got these lovely hand-drawn bunker shapes and I'm out there mapping the golf course and I'm drawing these images and I'm pacing off the bunkers. I'm going lengthwise and getting scale and all those things. And I'm so proud of myself that I'm out here doing this. And after about 3 holes, this gentleman comes over and he goes, "You going to rake those bunkers?" And I'm like, well, the course is closed and tomorrow, they'll probably rake them before play. And he said, no, you need to go and rake all those bunkers. So it was an introduction. The Scots were very abrupt and very matter of fact with the way they speak. And I just felt horrible. I felt so stupid. I just really, and I went back and I raked every single bunker that I had walked and paced side by side. So I'd had this amazing welcome to the old course. And then I got this amazing lecture on respecting the old course and taking care of it. And so it was, it was to become my favorite place in the world to play golf and to have those kinds of introductions, something I'll obviously never forget.
The first time and the only time I played Augusta National was in December of 2012. And when I ever share the experience, I talk about how emotional it made me. And the first time I played the Old Course was September of 1995 with my dad. And it was similar but different. And the similarity was I was very emotional. It just got to me in ways that I hadn't planned on it, hadn't thought about it. And I think they're the two places that get to people. And one is so public that it's the world's most famous dog park on a Sunday, as you pointed out. And the other is kind of like Oz, but yet they do the same things to you. Does Augusta get you emotional like the Old Course does?
Augusta, no. I'm obviously, every time I get invited to play there, which is an amazing opportunity, I understand and I respect, and it's one of the greatest golf experiences you can ever have, because you're walking in the footsteps of all these amazing things that have happened in the world of golf, and they're fresh in your mind and your memory. But I think there's something about, you're dealing with modern history versus ancient history, right? And you're dealing with, the fountainhead of what I get to do for a living. And so, we talked about a few months ago how Augusta National was inspired by the Old Course, and Mackenzie and Jones really looked to that for a lot of the principles of what they put into Augusta. So I think as a result, while an invitation to Augusta is cherished and any moment you get to spend there is magic, there's just something more emotional in my mind about the Old Course because of the relevance it has to what we do, and I think the way that Jim and I appreciate and understand and love that golf course.
When you were getting ready to embark on the Black Horse at Stream Song, you and I sat down together in the clubhouse, and one of the questions I asked you was, if I put you on the first tee anywhere and said, I want you to walk all 18 holes of said golf course because you'll learn the most about what you do from it, without hesitation, you said the Old Course. I'm going to ask you the follow-up to the answer, why?
Because you see so much that, I think that the golf architecture is so much art and it's so much architecture, and there the blending of the two is perfect. There's the hard edges of the town, there's the buildings, there's everything that greets you when you tee off and then greets you as you come in, and then from there you leave a setting that's unlike most any other place I've ever seen, and especially with the way the town embraces and loves, and the world's most famous clubhouse is right over your shoulder as you're doing this, and you've got people watching you, so you've got the pressure of actually the world's widest fairway, but you're still holding your breath that you're going to hit it, and so all of these emotions that are tied up in the setting for how you start and finish are evident, and then you work your way out into this landscape that's untamed, raw in many aspects of it. And while it works from a architectural perspective, it was never, it didn't spring from the mind of a person. It just sprung from nature. It sprung from how people traversed that particular piece of land and how it ultimately, all right, this is the best place for a green. The bunkers were just carved, we don't want to get into all that stuff, but the randomness of nature is something that man just can't create, right? Our brains are always working to either restore or provide order to something. And when you have something that's so utterly natural in itself, and the fact that then how it works and how it's thoughtful in the ways you can play it and approach it, and strategic and interesting, and changes on day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute on how each golf hole plays. And I think, this is a bit of a trite response because I think it's certainly not original to me, but it's the one where you say you could play the Old Course your whole life and never play the same shot in the same conditions twice, because the vagaries of how things bounce and move and change and the way the wind blows and the rain, et cetera, I think there's just so much of that is helpful to anyone trying to learn and appreciate and understand that, and the golf courses are a journey, and that journey is as special as anyone. And the fact, obviously we all revere the fact that every golfer who's ever been great at this game has walked those fairways and has crossed that bridge, and we see it and we know it's the home of golf and all of those things. But just from a purely architectural standpoint, that journey through that landscape is unlike anything else I think I've ever seen or witnessed.
One of the things that I know you do when you do a restoration, you really dig in on trying to understand the vision of the person who had the original commission. And these are the titans of the golden age of architecture, the people I'm talking about. And it wasn't, as you just alluded to, it's not the mind of the man. So what is the overarching design feature of the old course?
That's a great question, because what I love about it is the variety and the different options and ways to play shots. They're just, depending on how you play, your skill set, the desire, the way you want to hit a golf shot, the way the golf course is asking you to hit that golf shot. I think there are just so many, they're infinite possibilities and ways to do things. And I think that, in my mind, is what's so fascinating about it, is that, I think about the approach to six and just how that green just kind of ramps up and there's a valley, you can bump a ball through there and you just can, or if the wind's in your face, you can throw it up in the air and you've got, but there's just so many options. And I think that, great architecture, great golf architecture provides the players options and variety. And I think the old course does that better than just about anywhere else. So from a pure design, what do I see when I look at it? That would be the strongest suit, I think. Obviously the double greens are exciting and interesting. I mean, there's all the features within the golf course that are phenomenal, but it's, in my mind, it's the options and the ability to attack it in so many different ways, and not any one way is the correct way. And think about that. I mean, that's fascinating. We as architects try and lay out golf holes to say, hey, if you hit it over here close to this bunker, it's going to open up an angle that you're going to play into the shot into this and ... And so there's not really one right way, but there's the thoughtful way to approach a golf hole, and you can hit different shots in order to get there. But at the old course, it's just, you've got just so many different ways to play it. And to talk to the locals, and they stand on 14 and they say, the best way to the second shot, the best way to play it is to hit it over into 5, over and hit it way over left, because you get a better look at it. And then there are other people, no, just hit it to the end of, and then play straight in, and no, carry hell bunker, and that's a better and it's just none of those is right. But all of them work at some certain level. And I think that those options and opportunities are things that we all strive to create in a golf course, but we're not always successful.
You told me this, and you always reaffirm the importance of, the superintendent and the agronomics of a golf course, and the golf course is only as good as the people who maintain it. The turf there, I don't think it gets talked about enough, Gil. I mean, I get it, and why wouldn't you just get wrapped up in this old gray town and all of it? But the ground it's everything. Explain why it's this perfect blend of all the things that you need to create this turf condition that's perfection.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how else to describe it, but when you play the old course, the ground is alive, right? I mean, it's alive. The ball hits and reacts and goes in different ways. And so much of that, again, we keep talking about nature and nature design, et cetera. But it's the way, if it's wet, it's going to play a certain way. The ball's going to skid more than it's going to bounce. And when it's dry, it's going to bounce and fly and move. And I don't know if there's anything to the fact that it's been tended and taken care of for centuries, and that there's a certain density between the turf and the sandy subsoil that somehow gives it this spring-like effect that's just different. But it is. And you would think a golf course that's played, I don't know how many rounds a year they do there, but it's significant. We just get
somewhere in the
beaten up.
neighborhood about 80,000. About 80,000. Yeah.
You'd think it would be tired and worn out, and just but that somehow the team there knows how to regenerate that turf and knows how to basically get the most out of that soil, and it's just care, and it's on and on from the different superintendents who've been there. They've almost, I wonder if there's like some special, almost feels like probably there's a Hogwarts ceremony. When you go from here to here, there's this thing, and then they whisper in your ear, or they give the wand and they put the magic thing in your ear, and all of a sudden you understand there's this code of how you take care of that turf. It wouldn't surprise me if something like that happened. But it's just special. It's like you said, it's unlike anywhere else. I mean, links turf is fantastic, and it can be obviously produced and taken care of and presented in a way but there's just something, and I think part of it is that there's so many rolls and rumples and humps and bumps. Robert Hunter in the links,
yes,
he described a golf course, the best terrain is a corrugated landscape. And I've always loved that phrase, a corrugated landscape. And the old course has got those corrugations where it's just rumples and flows and humps and bumps and smaller scale contours, but just continual wave upon wave. Another great description of links courses is the terrain feels like the ocean from which it came. It's just, you've got these beautiful waves and rumples. And I think something about the turf and the density and the beauty of those contours, and then the seamless flow right up into the greens and the putting surfaces. It's just, I don't know how they ultimately put it all together, but when it always seems to work.
The challenge of challenging the best. It's now 2022, and we've seen a lot of places, but that place, and because people have such an affinity for it, they don't want it to ever be rendered anything but what it is, which is invaluable. If it doesn't blow, what could possibly happen?
Well, I think, I can't remember what Zach Johnson's, was he 15 or 16 under?
Yes.
Something like that to win. So it's going to probably be somewhere between 15 and 22, 23 under. And that's not a knock on the golf course. I mean, that's just the fact that links golf requires elements as part of the challenge. And if the elements aren't there, there's no wind, there's no rain, things like that don't happen, then I think you're ultimately, it's not that the golf course is defenseless. It's just that these guys are so good that, they need these. I mean, we saw it at Southern Hills. We had Mother Nature was a great part of the defense of that golf
Big
course.
Time.
If it had been kind of moist and wet in the golf course and the wind hadn't blown, those guys, they wouldn't be shooting 5-6 under. They would have shot more than that. So I think it's ultimately that's just part of any examination. What I hope doesn't ever become part of the narrative is that the game has passed that golf course by, because then that would truly be sad. So I don't think that will be the case. I would expect, although everything I'm hearing is that it's pretty dry over there, and it's been dry. And so the course will be very bouncy. So, are we going to see something like Tiger, avoiding, but you've got to avoid bunkers. And if it's bouncy, guard guys. It'll be interesting whether the guys just decide to just bomb it, or if they're going to lay back and try and opt for more control, which will then effectively lengthen the golf course, which will be shortened not only because of the firmness, but lack of wind. So I think it's going to be one of those, I can't wait to watch. Obviously, it's the major championship. You always, it used to be every 5 years. Hopefully it'll continue to be every 5 years they go to the Open. I know COVID intervened, and I think they were staggering to try and get the 150th.
Yes.
So it's been, it's now been 7 years, which is a little bit of a long gap for them. So I think it's one of those things where hopefully that conversation doesn't ever occur, that, the old course is obsolete. That would be sad.
No question. With Tiger, everyone said, well, the great thing about the old course is that it's flat. and I always I want to say, no, it isn't. I understand that when you're standing on one, you can see really far, but that walk in between may be one of the most awkward walks you've ever had if you just look straight ahead. And it gets back to what you were saying about what Robert Hunter had written about. And I love what he has always said about contour. There is no place like there in terms of the kind of shots that are being asked to be struck, and not because of wind and the direction and how it might change, but the way the ball is in relation to where you're trying to play it because of the contour on the golf course. So it's anything but flat.
Yeah, no, it's flat. If you took sort of overall elevation change,
right,
it's pretty flat, but you're right. You're going to go up and down, and you're going to be moving constantly. And I don't know whether, long, gradual uphills like Augusta or like Southern Hills are easier on Tiger's leg, or these little abrupt ups and bumps and humps and constantly changing and, having to watch where you're walking. I could imagine that's going to be a bit, but obviously he's prepared. He knows that golf course is well better than anybody in the field. And so I think he understands what it is, but you're right. It's definitely not flat.
The loop, the last time I played the golf course, I did something I hadn't done the previous 5 times, and that was start on 10, which was different. And what in particular about the loop is most interesting to you?
Well, one of the, I was trying to think, what are the flaws of the old course, and we can maybe talk about that later. But I mean, you start here, you come into it with a par 3 on 8, and then you've got obviously back-to-back short 4s, and then predicated on the fact that the wind's going to hopefully be in your face on one of them and downwind on the other, or a crossing wind, and you've got to deal with that on those 2, and then you exit the loop on another par 3. And so I think it's an interesting reversal in the way that it comes around it. I wouldn't say that either 9 or 10 are my favorite golf holes out there. But it's, when you talk about a pace of a golf course, I think the players understand that, hey, they've got to score there, right? They've got to take advantage of 9 and 10. And I think, in particular, 9 green is subtle, but it's pretty flat and it's massive. And so I think if you can, those guys, most of them could probably hit 3-wood on it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where, you've got to hit a good putt there. And then 10 is 10's got a lot of ups and bumps and in the approach and a bunker and green that wraps around and is, obviously shared with number 8. So I think it's one of those things where it's really a beautiful convergence as that sets up. But it's of the entire piece of property out there, it's not my favorite part of the golf course. But I understand its importance as far as getting those guys who've got to score there.
The hole that you mentioned that you come out of the loop and 11, there were some modifications. Explain to me as best you can or in detail as far as what was done to that green and in the last 10, 15 years. Anything that's ever done, anytime that the golf course is touched, people, throw up their hands. What did they change to the green on 11? And what is it about that hole that when I stand on that tee, I think this is as good. I think it's magnificent.
Yeah, I think, and obviously the Eden hole has been copied over and over again as part of, Dollar Rainer with the template holes. So it's a keeper for sure. My understanding of what they did was they leveled a little more of a level spot along the left-hand side along Hill Bunker, which would provide the opportunity to put some hole locations over there, which would be more consistent with the original when the greens were rolling slower. There were hole locations over there. And so I think it makes that area part of the golf course much more useful. My understanding is that when, I can't remember, it was 2010 when Oosthuizen won, we're blowing off the green there.
Yes.
And they were just, because you're at your most exposed, you're right on the Eden estuary. Green sits high up in the air. I mean, the wind, if it's blowing hard, which obviously was then and can do, there's no stopping it, right? I mean, it's not like you're down in a hollow or can shelter from it. So you're right. While everything that is done to that golf course should be appropriately scrutinized, I think the intention of it was really well thought out. and I believe the execution was done well also. So I think it's one of those things where, yes, we'd hate to put fingerprints on that golf course, but I think given the exposed nature of that green and the fact that, I haven't done the research, but I'm fairly certain that there were whole locations over there at one point in time.
Yeah.
And I'm on record of saying, I really think it's you modify green speeds instead of modifying architecture. But in that particular instance, because you're so exposed and because of the severity of the slope over there, I can understand why they chose to take that course.
The first hole, I was saying in the Open, it's 127 yards across as it shares that fairway with the 18th. But there's something that you feel like you're walking down a corridor. I don't know. I stood taller. There's something that gives you a bounce on what would appear to be and does as innocuous an opening hole as you could have. But to me, Gil, the closer you get to the burn, the more you start to get. I've always gotten pulled in. Like you hit your tee shot and then you start walking. And it's like, oh my God. And then you get to your second and you probably have a short iron in your hand. And even if the pin is back, I don't know, the burn is the whole thing. It's like once you hit your second shot, it's like you're sucked into the vortex of the whole experience.
Yeah, it's as I said earlier, it's aside from maybe the tee shot at Marion, the most nerve-wracking tee shot you can ever hit. Marion, everybody's eating and clattering plates, and all of a sudden you notice when you're getting ready to hit, it goes dead silent. And same thing. There's all these people milling and mulling about, and moving around, and then you get to go up on the tee, and all of a sudden it's just quiet, and that everybody's watching you hit that shot. So it's one of those things where you got to, and obviously a really good golfer doesn't worry that much about it. But if you're the average golfer like me, it's nerve wracking. But you want to get it down there so that you're not having to hit something long and carry the burn, and then have it try and stop on the green. So you're pushing further down, and as you said, you get kind of drawn into that vortex to get a better option. A lot of players just say aim at the bridge, aim at Slocum Bridge and just come in from over there. And I think that's probably a good rest your nerves type line where you can actually, just kind of hit it in that direction and try, hopefully not have too much danger out there. And then, it's a fairly, unless you get to the back sides of it, an innocuous green, it's just kind of flattish, tilted at you, et cetera. But that, I don't know how many paces across that burn is, but it grabs your attention. Although I've seen a lot of balls bounce and skip across it. So it's one of those, I may have even hit one or two that have done that. So you can get away with it, occasionally. But yeah, it's so simple in its presentation. Right?
Oh yeah.
Big, big area hit it into, very small creek running across, fairly benign green. Here you go. And it somehow still makes quite a bit of a challenge to a golf hole.
One of the things that you've done to a lot of places that you've restored is return the presentation to the way it was upon its creation, or as close to it. And with the old course, some of the bunkering, it was rugged, it was raggedy. If you look at the road hole bunker from 100 years ago, it wasn't this pristine, revetted face looking thing. It just wasn't. How do you feel about it looks, the facings are awesome, but would it be better if they were just unkept?
Aesthetically, in my opinion, yes. But we also, it's a similar question that we hear, at Pebble Beach. You see those photos
yes.
of number 7 when it looked, it was kind of these raid, but you have to also understand that it's a business, right? They need to move people through that golf course. And if it was unkempt and I had being balls getting lost in the faces of bunkers or, barrowing, being hit in, I think there has to be some sort of balance there. And the evolution of the revetted bunker and the stack sod and the way that whole thing comes about, it has evolved across the board. I mean, Jim and I and Mark Parsonen attempted at Castle Stewart to build some more of those old raggedy style bunkers that you see in Horace Hutchinson's book of the links. But I just don't know that. I think that because the evolution is so pretty much complete from links course to links course to links course, I mean, they all kind of have evolved into this more cleaner edged stack sod look. I think it's probably appropriate for the old course that they've gone in that direction. And it's also, as I mentioned, probably helps to get players around the golf course in a more reasonable fashion.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go through when you turn, you play the loop and you start back in, and you turn toward home and you're standing on 12T. Take me through just some things in particular that stand out in your mind about those holes from 12 on in. What about 12 is memorable or noteworthy?
That you can't see any of the bunkers
at all.
It's amazing that, yeah. I mean, and talk to people who say, well, when the course was played in reverse, they're all right there in front of you. And so that's just a feature of that hole, which I think is brilliant. I love that, you've got to basically pick and trust the line. And, the old boys that I get to play there with occasionally, they all just kind of hit it down the right and kind of get it. There's a little way down. You can get over closer to the Eden course that you'll avoid some of the bunkers. But then it's also, I just love the sort of cackle. Nope, that's not good. And you think, what? I just hit it right down the middle of the fairway. And then you're stuck in it. And I think that green is phenomenal. I mean, just that slender shelf and the way the pins are set up there, and then you've got the roll offs, and you've got to be so precise. And if you're trying to come out of one of those fairway bunkers, it's an interesting. It's an unusual hole, but it's a wonderful golf hole. It's not something that you see repeated very often, except for the green complex and the concept of that. But it's just one of those things where I just architecturally I marvel at that golf hole in particular. And then you go from that, shortish. Certainly, if it's downwind, the best players in the world are going to be flying all that stuff and getting it up. Although there's that one little kind of bunkery that's not a lot of fun to be in up in the approach there. And then 13 is just hard, right? I mean, it's just it's a hit it as far as you can, and then you're kind of down and looking up, and you've got all that broken ground rumbling through that you've got to play over to get into the green. And the green itself is fantastic with the bunkers around it. I know people say that's kind of where the old, where the real teeth of the golf course start. You kind of come in. 13 is certainly one of those golf holes, and then 14 is a par 5 for those guys. It's certainly going to be, there's a scoring opportunity for them, as you would expect. But it's, one of the things about the old course that's just so amazing and cool in a way is just, and it hasn't been really replicated anywhere else. And you would think maybe somewhere somebody's done it from a commercialization standpoint, but all the names, right? You're playing into the Elysian fields, the biblical note of, man, if you hit it into it, it's like you're in heaven. And you got the Beardies, and then Hell Bunker, Pulpit. And why is that called Pulpit? Because you can see hell from there. And, it's just all of these little quirky, cool stories that go with these features that, there's nowhere else in the world of golf that I know of. I mean, maybe Prestwick's got a few of these things, and they're more whole names than feature names, Cardinal Bunker. But I think that's such a cool feature. And obviously 14 has got a ton of those things, on it. It's got a lot of names. It's got and really interesting thought processes we talked about. A lot of players can't get home in 2 are going to play over, far left over into 5 fairway to come into that green. That knob that kind of forms the base for the front right of the green, all feeding into it, I think is really an interesting one, because you're not trying to hit your ball off of it, because generally it'll just shoot it through the green, and if you hit into the face of it, it'll stop it. So it's as a par 5 trying to get home in 2, there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens out there. 15, we walked back to where the back tee is now. I mean, you're so far back there. of the finishing stretch, in my mind, probably the least memorable of the holes. I mean, a good golf hole,
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it, but again, it's a challenging golf hole, especially with the additional length that you've got there. And then 16 has architecturally spawned so many, with the principal's nose, the centerline bunker, trying to squeeze it between the out of bounds and the bunker, and the much better advantage from an angle perspective to go into that, play away from it. Although the one thing I did notice when I was there in April is that there's not a lot of fairway to the left of the bunker complex. It's all rough over there. So they've almost like somehow they've decided to just tell the player, either you stay short of it or you have to go around the right side and bring the out of bounds into trouble, or go over it, which for those guys is obviously a possibility. So it was a change that I was a little perplexed by. It just seemed like, okay, this is one of the best architectural golf holes in the world, and it's inspiration for so many really good golf holes, and they really tightened it up, at least in my memory, in my eye, what I saw there. Beautiful green. And then 17, what are you going to say about the road hole? It's just, incredible golf hole, unusual. Again, like number 12, where else are you going to see that, where you're playing over what were the old rail sheds, and, basically trusting that you're going to hit it over this and shorten the golf hole. And then diabolical green complex with the road over the back and the road hole bunker, and just how slender it is, and trying to get I'm always interested to see how guys can get a ball over the road hole bunker and on that shelf and stay there with the length of shots they're hitting in there. And I guess that's why you want to shorten the golf hole by going over the corner. I mean, it all makes sense, but it's presented in a way that nobody would have ever thought to present it. I know we have templates that are road holes, but I mean, that particular presentation is unbelievable.
No, it is. I think sometimes with things in life, you get romantic, and your objectivity may get compromised to some degree. Do we, with the amount of boundary that you deal with on the holes coming home, the fact that there is as much out of bounds on the golf course on the closing stretch of holes, and then the fact that you're hitting a golf shot, over parts of a hotel to try to play it in the fairway? Are we giving the golf course a break because of what it is?
To a certain extent, I think so. I think there's certainly that appreciation and tradition that comes into factor, but I don't think it was certainly not a bad golf hole. It's just a different. I mean, it's the whole, the thought. Okay, all the trouble's down the right. The out of bounds, the hotel, the most of the bunkering, so you can play safely to the center of the golf course, but you're going to be faced with obviously more difficult approaches into the greens if you play it safe. So I think that given the opportunity, in today's litigious society, there's no way you would ever try and hit a golf ball over a hotel. I mean, that just couldn't be possible. But because, they've decided there obviously was a different structure there, but I think because it was always that way, and because it makes perfect sense from a golfing perspective, shortening the golf hole, getting the best angle from the right side to try and get it, around the road hole bunker and stay out of the road, it all makes perfect sense. And yeah, is it different? And could anybody try and do something like that right now? Probably not. Would they be criticized for trying to do something like that now? Yeah, I would expect that they would.
Yeah. 18, this is not a new thing.
Well, I do have to, sorry, to go back to one of my favorite stories. And did you ever meet Jim Finnegan, the great golf writer?
No.
Wrote all these. He was quite a character, true gentleman, and a lover of the old course like nobody. I mean, he I don't know, he probably played it thousands of times, and just loved the golf course. He was playing once with Graham Lenny, the old golf professional from Crail. And Jim had this just way. He was an advertising guy, and he just had this sense about him. And I won't do him justice with the way he spoke, but I'll try. And Graham hit it in the road hole bunker, and then got it up and down out of the road hole bunker and made a 4. And Jim, looking at Graham on the 18th, he said, "You, sir, have escaped from not the most feared bunker on this golf course, but perhaps the most feared bunker in all of golf. And he would just do this for me. And that's the way he talked about, the old course. It was always such this just great drama about it, and just what an incredible love. So whenever I'm there, I'm lucky that I frequently get to play it with Graham. But we're always thinking about Jim Finnegan and how much he truly, truly loved that golf course.
18, this is not new because of today's technology or the athlete in the game. I mean, Nicklaus was blowing it over the 18th green in the early 70s on occasion. Why does 18 hold up? Why does a 350-yard closing hole with no water and a 127-yard wide fairway, why does it hold up?
Valley of Sin. I mean, it's a pretty tough hazard to get. Well, it's not a hazard, obviously, but to get through it,
right?
And with the right pace to get up there and not run through the back of the green, and then you're standing on the back of the green looking at the Valley of Sin. If you do run through there, and if you hit it a little too hard, it's going to go back down in there. And I think Tiger plays. He always play out to the left, like almost at the R&A clubhouse, and try and come in from the side. And yes. I think that's in. So now you've got this, again, like you said, this innocuous looking golf hole, but obviously out of bounds down the right-hand side. But I think it's just that, Constantino Rocca, John Daly. I mean, all these things happened with the Valley of Sin. And I think that's the equalizer, right? Because you've got to negotiate that. You either have to negotiate it by taking it on or going over it, or you have to purposely play away from it to play, in from the side. So I think it's ultimately, it's all about that Valley of Sin. And it has been, with Seve, with Jack, with Doug Sanders. I mean, all of those, it's always been the part and parcel of what really defends that hole.
The other thing, Gil, that I think is that, and I know because, and you've shown it with some of your work, particularly at Ohoopee, 17 and 18 to me are the great half pars. 17 is a 4. The data will show you're probably picking up at least a half a shot in all likelihood on the field. And 18, you feel like you need to make 3. It's 4.5, 3.5 to me, and especially for the elite golfer. And I think that to me is like Jordan Spieth didn't make 3 on 18 in 2015. He went 5-4. And he made, it's essentially he needed the half shot on each hole to give him the shot to get in the playoff.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's a great, and when we think about it, again, no man laid that out, right? So it's not from the mind of a person, but a lot of links golf and certainly golf that we like to build is based on match play. Right. And so it's one of those things where, if the match is going to get to 18, you've got to play some good golf. And so 17 is really a great test for that. And then once you get to 18, it's almost, all right, all bets are off. Go at it. You decide how you want to play this. There are opportunities to make 2. There's opportunities to make 3, 4, 5. Unless, if you hit it out of bounds, there's a chance to make 6. But, most people are not. But it's the mindset Jim and I we talk an awful lot about. And I know, again, nobody thought this through, but it's just the way it evolved, is that it's nice to finish a round of golf and a match with positive stuff happening, with somebody winning with a birdie or an eagle versus somebody just hanging on, slogging their way to a bogey, and it ties another bogey and you were one up and you win. So I think it's one of those things where it has turned into that. And like we talked, starting this whole thing off, I mean, what a theater, right? You've got the town, you've got all the people, and when you have the Open Championship, you've got the grandstands, and you've got this enclosed amphitheater in the home of golf. I get chills just thinking about, when you walk. I can't imagine what it would be like to walk up that, cross that bridge, and with all that history and tradition, and just the setting is unlike anything. If you were a movie producer, that's like the stage set you'd like to construct for a championship, because you've got just the boundaries are wonderful. The history is there. The architecture, the edifices of all the structures, they're all so familiar to us as you see that. And it's just, it really is a special way to finish, and to have all of that compounding what is a fairly simple / easy looking golf hole. I mean, that's got to also play into it, is that, corralling your nerves and corralling your emotions as you're playing that's pretty simple, easy shot or an easy hole.
All right, let me get you out of here. 5 questions about the old course. The best bunker on the old course for you is which one?
My favorite name is Mrs. Kruger. I don't know who she was. That's an interesting one. I love the Beardies. I think the Beardies. I know it's not one bunker, but I think that's such a beautiful little minefield of bunkers there.
All right, the best. What do you? And again, this is you. The best second shot on the old course. Where would you find it?
I love the second shot into 4 with that mound in front of the green and just all the things you can do, and just where you are on the golf course, and the angle that you're playing into it, and having to negotiate it. All the things that can happen. It can shed balls in every different direction. If you land on it, or the backside of it is shooting you through the back of the green, if you land into the front of it, it's just so perfectly placed, yet so incredibly natural.
All right. The best green complex on the golf course is which one?
I really like 2 and 16. I think all the contour on 2, and then how it continues to plateau and move over, and then the way 16 kind of wraps around the front of that bunker. And, as obviously we talked about the strategy of 16. I think the contour and the way they transition from one side to the other, that's probably my favorite. I think 5 and 13 is just, my God, it couldn't be anything more impressive than the scale on the size of those 2 combined.
All right, the best view on the old course.
Boy, that's a great one. It's got to be coming looking back into town, but I'm trying to think where you get up high enough that maybe from 14, from the end of the Elysian Fields, kind of looking down into hell and across, and then all the way back into the town. I think that's a really spectacular spot.
I tell you mine, 12T.
Yeah.
When you stand on 12T, considering what's behind you, and then it's the first time you really are, you're turning back toward what's in front of you. And there's enough elevation that, I don't know, there's something about just how grand that particular spot is. That's my favorite.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a really good one.
All right, the best place could be a bar, could be a restaurant, could be a bookstore. What's the best place in town?
So when we were, last century, when we first started going to St. Andrews, there was a bookstore right there on the Pillmore. It was Quarto Books. It's no longer there. And it was a great bookshop, and you could always find terrific golf books in there. And Graham Lenny, who I mentioned earlier, we would always go in and just scour, try and find these obscure golf books and hopefully get a deal on them. So that was always my favorite place, as from a store standpoint. The last time we were there, Tracy and Kaylee and I spent a lot of time walking, and Tyler actually and Leah were with us. We just around the university. Yeah. I hadn't really spent a lot of time coming around, over by the harbor, and that part of it's beautiful. I mean, it's really beautiful. The old buildings are incredible in that part, and obviously, paying homage to Old Tom and Young Tom and now Mount Robertson. And that's a special experience that hopefully people will take advantage of doing. But yeah, the old Quarto Bookshop, it was a special place.
And you know that it's not there anymore? Do you know it's gone?
It's gone. It's a golf shop. It's one of the golf shops along. I don't know if Octolani's expanded into it, or it was a cool spot. I mean, it was right there around the corner you could walk out the door, and the R&A clubhouse is pretty much right there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, listen, I always value the time. These are special weeks. I know you'll enjoy it, even though you got a lot on your plate, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks. Always enjoy the conversation.
Well, really appreciate Gil taking the time. Usually he does his show with whoever, as I said, but I said, let me do this one with you, because I love talking about it. More importantly, I love hearing his thoughts. about where the last men's major of the year is at the most special place, the Old Course. So for all of us here at Five Clubs Golf, enjoy the Open Championship. We appreciate you taking the time to watch and listen to this conversation. We'll see you next week.